Hello, today in my storytelling playlist, I'm going to give you life as an expat. So, this is obviously just a very almost a snapshot of what it's like to be an expat, but I'm going to talk a bit about the people that I encounter out here and maybe an anecdote or two thrown in about some of the people and about just things that expats kind of have to deal with. So, if you don't know, I live in South Korea for quite a long time, but I've also lived in Thailand and in Vietnam. Um, and obviously, I'm from the US, from Detroit. So, I have lived in several different places, but I'm going to focus mostly on Korea, but I think what I'm saying here also applies to some extent to Vietnam and Thailand. And I have traveled to other countries in this region, and I've met expats in those countries as well. And I think this kind of applies to almost all expats. But with that said, there are exceptions to every rule. And like everything else in life, there are lots of kind of varied experiences, and this might not include everybody, but I kind of think it, as a generalization, it works. Okay, so the first thing that is a problem for expats, and this can generate a lot of interesting experiences, is the language barrier. And I would say that's the case probably even if you've studied a lot and you go somewhere. I think you're still going to have quite a bit of a language barrier. You know, I know people in Korea that have been out here for 20 years and they can speak very good Korean, but, you know, it's pretty hard to get to near native level speaking. So that language barrier has an effect on everything. It has an effect on the nuance of an argument or disagreement or misunderstandings. There are many, many, many situations where just a little difference in the language barrier could go a long way if you had it. Now, I wouldn't say I'm the best at Korean. I'm better than basic, but not much better than that. I should probably be better at it than I am. But even people that I've known that have spoke Korean very well, there's always this kind of language problem. And to some degree, I think that's also a cultural problem. In the West, we're used to many different cultures speaking English and mixing, and in Korea, that is not the case. Korea, the Koreans are the predominant culture here, and it's about a 50-to-1 ratio, so 49-to-1. We are just definitely the minority, and we always will be, so we have to kind of adapt to their culture. And I would say in Asia, that's probably the case for just about everywhere. It's not as much of a melting pot as it is in the West. And each culture here, I don't want to say they're overtly racist because that's another generalization, but they don't mix well, I guess is the better way to put it. Koreans have opinions about Filipinos, they have opinions about Chinese, about Japanese. The Filipinos have opinions about Koreans. Like, it's really, I don't want to say segregated, but like when you grow up in the West, I don't want to say that there's a Asian generalization, but I think through the media and stuff, there's not enough nuance defining the different cultures. And, if there are some restaurants or things in the US, yeah, you're eating the food, but you're not really experiencing the culture per se. So I don't think that people in the West have a very clear idea of what it's like over here as far as the different cultures. Having lived over here for a long time, I can usually spot someone. Like if I'm walking down the street, and I'd be like, oh, they're definitely not Korean. You might be able to narrow it down to like the Philippines or Vietnam or Thailand or Myanmar or someplace. Japanese look very different than the Koreans. And I'm not just saying visual looks, but I'm also saying the style, the way they carry themselves, lots of factors. So when an expat comes into this world, this might be the case for any expat around the world. If you are an expat, you can chime in on this. Or if you know some or whatever, you can also do that. Have them chime in. But I would say over here at least that most of the expats are kind of misfits in their own cultures. And they're probably 9 times out of 10 running away from something. Now in the old days, like maybe 20 or 30 years ago, some of the people were running away from the law, or, it was much easier to do that from what I've heard. I wasn't here then, but people have told me. People might mess up in their own country and then flee and then come to Asia and kind of get lost in Asia. But these days, I would say most people are more cultural misfits. They're not exactly like outlaws. But usually when you meet someone, there's some experience in their past or some flaw or something that made them leave. And, people can tell themselves they left for a job or, for a different reason. But I think most of the time it's the people having some kind of flaw or a mistake they made or something happened, and that's when they decided to leave. Now, you could say, yeah, well, I just want to travel and see the world. Well, that's a possibility. In my experience, I haven't met too many people that are really like that out here. In fact, I would say almost the opposite. That idea of like traveling the world almost feels a little bit naive. And I'm not saying there are not people that come here that are doing that, because there are, but they don't last. They usually maybe are out here for a few months and then they end up leaving because they're not mentally prepared for what you have to actually deal with. It seems kind of like a fantasy, and then you get into the fantasy and suddenly the rose-colored glasses come off and it's much different than people anticipate it to be. Now, the people that come through the area that I live in, which is not a major city, it's Daejeon, and it's pretty small compared to many of the other cities in Korea, but we get people cycling through here. And what I mean by that is, they'll be here for a year and then you never see them again. And it makes the relationships you have with the people that you've known for longer much more important, almost to the point of like brother and sisterhood or something. You're both experiencing this struggle and you're doing it together. I kind of compare it a little bit to kind of those stories you hear about the Vietnam War. I'm not saying this is like a war. I'm not trying to compare it that way. That's not exactly what I mean. But you always hear the stories about the guys that are green that would, show up in the camp and all like the veterans that have been around for a while kind of like take bets on how long they'll last, or there's a lot of kind of hazing or that kind of thing. I think that's actually very similar to this situation. You meet someone and you're like, well, I don't know. I don't really think they're going to make it. Occasionally someone surprises you because they have more grit inside than they might at first appear to have. But I would say 9 times out of 10, the hunches on those people are correct. They don't make it. And I think it makes it where the long-time expats tend to not give them much time of day or help them. I know that, I've met people that have come here from Japan, and they lived in Japan a year or two, and they come here and they get on really well with the expat community because they already have those 2 years in a different culture under their belt, so they kind of react differently to situations and they have some experience with it. But if someone is right off the boat, let's say, right out of their country, and they come here, they're just really green and everyone else kind of sees it. Now that sounds like it's makes the expats out to be kind of elitist or a-holes or something, but I don't really think that's the case. I think sometimes we will give people a chance, but we've known so many people that have come through that have just failed and left that it's hard to get invested into someone until you kind of can see if they're going to make it or not. Because, it takes effort to make friends with people. It takes effort to explain things to people. And most of the time when green people come here, newly expat, I don't want to say they're helpless, but they just don't know enough to they're not self-sufficient enough, and so a lot of times they kind of latch on or grab on to a person who is, and nobody really wants that, so it just happens. But a lot of the people out here are kind of rambler, gambler types where danger and adventure is something that they really crave. And so you see people doing crazy stuff out here. Maybe not as much in Korea as I've seen in like Thailand or Vietnam or someplace, but there is still an element of that. I will say that Southeast Asia, as opposed to East Asia, is a little darker in that kind of way. There's a lot of unhinged people that go there and do really crazy things. But I think in all the cases, when you're away from your country and you're in a foreign environment, there's this idea that like anything is possible because you don't fit in culturally with the people around you. It gives you a certain leeway to act whatever way you want. Some people have enough self-control and respect for the culture to not cause problems, but there are many that do not, and sometimes they get arrested or they get kicked out of the country, deported. There's many things that happen, and there's so many cultural differences as far as like certain situations. If there's like a fight or something like that, in the West, it would be handled a certain way. Whereas at least in Korea, it can be a strange situation because there's CCTV everywhere. And, you might not even start the fight, but it doesn't end well for you, partly because you're a foreigner, but also because, you're here on a visa where your company is probably sponsoring you, or you're a student and your school is sponsoring you, but there's definitely a sponsor often. So it puts you in a situation that can be kind of complicated. But actually, I'll tell you a quick story about a situation like this. A friend of mine was at a bar, and he walked in there, and this girl was playing a song, because you can go up to the bar and kind of choose the song on the computer or whatever. She was playing a song. Wasn't a very good song, but, everyone has their own opinion on that kind of thing. So my friend waited patiently for the song to end, and then he went up there to put on a different song. Well, the girl went back up there and changed the song again to the same song she was playing before that already finished. So she's playing it for a second time. So my friend was kind of angry, obviously. And some people might have just let it go, but he wasn't going to let it go. And he flipped the girl off and put on his song. Well, you're not supposed to do that in Korea. That gesture is quite offensive, more than maybe in the West to some degree. I think only because they recognize it as a derogatory gesture in the West. So maybe it has even more power here than it does back home. So my friend went back to his seat, and he's there, and a short time later, the police came to the bar. And my friend was like, what? So they got in this debate about it, and the woman was going to try to press charges on him because it was not really a verbal assault, but a somatic assault. So he was surprised, and he got quite upset, and it became kind of a scene, and they arrested him, and they took him to the prison, not the prison, the jail, like the police department. And there was this long sort of question answer thing going on between him and the police officers, who spoke very little English, and these girls. And eventually, my friend had only been here maybe a year at that time, maybe 2 years. So his Korean was not up to par for that kind of situation. So they allowed him to call someone else to come. So a different guy we knew that was Kyopo, which means foreign-born Korean, he came to kind of translate for my friend. And it turns out that he needed to apologize for it. And my friend is a bit obstinate. So he didn't think he should have to apologize for it. And it became pretty heated. And they basically told him if he did not apologize, they were gonna press charges on him and put him in jail. And most likely he'd get kicked out of the country. So at this time, my friend was very angry, and the friend that was translating, he talked him down and was like, listen, man, you just got to do this. There's no way out of it. And so he had to apologize to these girls. And then as soon as he apologized, it all went away. So it's very interesting. And I've seen many other situations like that where someone got punched, or, verbal altercations, and all of it's on CCTV. So there's always a record of it to some degree. And I've known people that had to pay 10 million won, which is around 10,000 US dollars, because of some random event. So the expats here, they often, at least the ones that have been here a while, they know that if there's some kind of thing starting, just to get out of there, just leave. It's not worth being roped into it, or having to deal with the repercussions or possible fallout from the situation, which will come back onto your visa or all these other things. So I don't know, like when these things happen, it can take a toll on a person because these things tend to happen a lot. And sometimes they're not even as overt as the example I just gave. Sometimes it can be very, very subtle. There was a story I remember from a few years ago where someone was at a Costco. There are a few Costcos here, not many, but there are some. And they were leaving the store, and a kid was running across the street, and a car came into the, oops, drop that. Car came into the parking lot quite fast, and it was about to hit the child. And this foreigner screamed and kind of grabbed the child by the arm and like pulled the child back from getting hit. Well, the parents only saw the foreigner pulling the child back. They did not really see the rest of the altercation, the rest of the situation. And the kid was crying. So like right from the start, there was this, people were like kind of against the foreigner guy, even though he saved the child basically. So he was taken to the police station, and there was this lot similar to my other friend. This isn't a person I know, but I read through, this was on Facebook or something. And he eventually had to apologize, even though he's the one that helped the child. And it just got escalated and escalated, and I think he might even have been married to a Korean woman, so she came and she was trying to deal with it. And I think after the fact he was like, well, next time I just won't do it, because it caused all this drama. And when you see the comments on a thread like that, most of these people are expats. Most of them are like, no, we're not going to get involved ever again, because like it can get turned on you very quickly. And I think that can happen anywhere. When I was in Vietnam, when I lived there, there was a guy that broke up a fight. Some guy was kind of groping a woman, and he got involved, and there was like this altercation. And then there were two bars next to each other, and the bars were kind of owned by kind of these Vietnamese mafia types. And one of the bars started beating up the person that helped the woman, and someone called the police to stop it. The police came and they arrested this person. I think they might have arrested some of the other people involved with the fight. But the point is this person got taken to the police station, and they were a foreigner, and through the grapevine, people think the person disappeared. Like, there were people he was there with, they couldn't find him. All this crazy stuff happened. The unproven hunches were that the police maybe were involved with the mafia too, and that they just made him disappear. Nobody really knows. He could have just got on a plane and got out of there, but for a while on the expat threads, people were talking like, where'd he go? Where was he? No one really knew. So that can be like a big wake-up call. It's like, whoa, okay, I don't know. I don't want to get involved. In Apocalypse Now, they say, like, never get off the boat. I think there are situations as an expat where you should not get off the boat. And what I mean by the boat is the straight and narrow of society, because as soon as you get on the fringes a little bit, it can be very, very dangerous, and you just don't have the same powers that you have in your own country. So you never really know what's going to happen. But with that said, I think that, most expats try to do a balance between immersion and kind of holding back. I have met people that tried to immerse fully, and they do it, and I'm not saying they're not successful, but something is lost, something is gained. And I know expats that have lived here for like 20, 25 years, and I always wonder what they would have been like before they came here, because I'm sure they were very different. And I think it can make a strain on a person. And I think the longer that you're out of your own culture, if you're not holding back and trying to hang on to your own culture, it can really warp the person you are. And I don't mean that it's bad to take on the attributes of another culture. That's not exactly what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that, like, if you have let's say you have some like silly putty, right? Some clay or silly putty, and you start pulling it, and it gets like thinner and thinner and thinner, right? And eventually it just snaps. Well, I think when you live in two different cultures, because even though I'm American and I live in Korea, I'm still American, and I am culturally American. Like, the things I watch on TV are American usually, or English or Australian or something, but definitely from the West. That's not to say I won't watch a Korean movie or a Korean TV show or something, but I'm always looking at it as an outsider, looking in. Now, once you get too immersed and that putty gets pulled and it snaps, it's really, I think, impossible to go back. So those of us that have been here a long time that are trying to retain our Westernness, let's say, I think it's a balancing act of being immersed to a degree, but also holding ourselves back from it 100%. The people that I've seen that have gone full into it, often it doesn't end well for them, I think. Whether they get into a weird marriage, or they are so far removed from their own culture that they're almost unrecognizable as a person from said culture. It can be very hard on a person, because our psychology is wired to like how we were brought up in our childhood. That's why people have cravings for certain food, or our manners or our habits. All that stuff is hardwired when we're very, very young. And so if you go into a place where it's totally different, and you start fiddling with those hardwired psychological aspects, like, a lot of bad things can happen, I think. It's just my observation about it. I don't know. I mean, there are probably plenty of people that have been able to do it and become, let's say, native. But I just think it's pretty hard to do. I don't know. I haven't, in my own experience, I have not met anyone that has lived in a foreign country for more than 20 years that is normal, if that makes sense. I think they're all quite strained, and yeah, I just don't know if it's a good idea. But one thing I will say about the expat experience, and maybe this is the last thing I'll say, is that it can be forever, I don't want to say entertaining, but some of the people that you meet are larger than life characters, because they've been, you think of like Ernest Hemingway, or William S. Burroughs, people that lived in different countries and traveled a lot. They're always kind of odd people. So you certainly meet, there's every kind of person you can possibly think of and they're all very, very eccentric in their own ways. Even if they might not seem that way on the surface, once you get in there, you start realizing. Myself included, I'm definitely an eccentric, but you know, I'll give you a couple quick anecdotes before I leave of some of these eccentric characters. Okay, so there's one guy that was a blues singer, and he used to sing in Canada, and he kind of, like I said, a lot of people are kind of on the run. He kind of burned his bridges in Canada, and he came here, and he was in a band here, and he used to do all kinds of crazy things. Like he'd be singing on stage, and then he'd go into the bathroom and go number two while he was still singing, and then he would, you know, come out, and there'd be like a party or something, and like on 4th of July, like he'd put a Roman candle like in his butt, like fired it off, and like just really crazy things. There was another guy that was maybe too drunk or something, and he took a fire extinguisher and was like spraying a pool table down with this fire extinguisher. And the woman that owned the bar that he was at, she found out he did it, and so she was going to press charges on him. But the irony is they ended up dating. So, like, he paid her money for the pool table to fix the pool table, but they ended up dating for a while after that. So, like, you meet all these crazy people. There, you know, there's just a lot of funny little stories. I mean, I could probably go on all day with the amount of stories, but I guess my point is that when you're an expat, it's just colorful. And I might, at a later date in this playlist, focus in on a few of the more colorful stories. But for today, I think that's about all I got. Anyway, have a good day. Take care.